Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, it's a good time if you'd like to silence your cell phones, and we'll take a moment of silence, please. All right. At this time, do we have any board member statements that anyone wishes to talk about? Yes, sir.
I just want to take this time to give a quick update on some opportunities I had the opportunity to participate in over the last 3 weeks since our last meeting. I had the opportunity to participate and speak at the Estrella Vista and JHS induction. Congrats to all the new inductees. And I also had the opportunity to watch some of the volleyball game beforehand. I also had the opportunity to participate in the community event along with my colleagues with the community of Alomar. I also had the opportunity to have coffee with the Avondale City Council along with Rachel, which was nice to join members of the community and council to talk to them. I also had the opportunity to plant trees this weekend with the city of Avondale at Mountain View Park. As you all know, I'm a proud climate activist and believe that climate change is one of the biggest essential threats facing my generation, and believe that any form of government should be taking action to battle the climate crisis that our generation faces. I also wanted to add that on Earth Day, April 22nd, the city of Avondale will also be planting 50 trees at Festival Fields Park. I obviously will be there. I encourage my colleagues and members of the community to come out, clean up the park, and plant some trees and celebrate the earth that we are all so grateful to live on. I also had the opportunity to speak at the Arizona Students Association Annual Youth Empowerment Summit, talking about my work as a governing board member, also speaking about some of the struggles that young people experience in being in elected office and participating in the public process. Sorry. The other side. I also had the opportunity to join an annual event with Campaign for Our Shared Future. It was amazing to speak with other school board members and speak with organizations whose jobs are to help and support school board members from throughout Arizona. This week, I also finished up my fellowship with School Board Partners, which is a national organization that supports and mentors school board members from around the country. It was an amazing experience, and I learned so much from them. I'm also proud to announce that I've been selected to move forward in the advanced cohort. I'm definitely looking forward to the national conference in July. I also just wanted to take this time to just speak on a bill that was brought through from the legislature, SB 1001, which would require that school districts and charters receive parent written approval to address students by their pronouns. If a teacher or staff member does not have parent approval, they would not be allowed to address a student by their pronoun or how they identify as. This bill is yet another attack from our state legislature on our LGBTQ+ community. For any people who are not aware, I'm a proud member of the LGBTQ+ community, and my pronouns are he/him. I continue to say that not only we as a district, but we as a society must do better to understand and support people for who they are. As someone who struggled with finding who I was, which led me to later attempt suicide on my life because of my struggle with my sexuality and mental health. All we are asking for as members of the LGBTQ+ community is to be left alone and be supported for who we are without tax from the people who are elected to represent us. I also just wanted to give a shout out to Arizona State Representative Lorena Austin, who gave a powerful speech during her no vote in committee. And that's all I have, Madam President.
Thank you. Is there anything else? No? Thank you. So Dr. Freeman, I'll turn it over to you to give a superintendent's report.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, and those in attendance tonight. Buenas tardes a todos, and good evening. Hope everybody came back somewhat refreshed from for our fourth quarter for the school year. April and May are months for celebration in the schools, and so while our mission is to create opportunities for success for everyone, our vision is that we're all leaders in learning, caring, and growing. So If your academics are at grade level, then you may be a success, but if you aren't, you still may be a success by growing more than others who are. And maybe you're on grade level, but you could use some more caring, then that's an opportunity for us to work on. I'd like to begin by thanking our assistant principals. These educators were honored across the nation last week, and despite their assistant title, our APs work independently to juggle multiple responsibilities, support student achievement, and keep our schools running smoothly. You only need a glimpse of the evening news to see how much stress and anxiety there is in American culture today. From the Black Lives Matter movement to the pandemic crushing inflation and then the shortage of staffing in Arizona schools, the role of the AP has never been more demanding. They're stretched very thin, rarely get all the time they need to really dig into solving problems. They're also learning whether they're on track to become principals. Later tonight, we'll see some of them who are ready to graduate to the principalship. Principals Day kicks off the month of May, and being a site leader is a hard job as well. It demands long hours and attention to so many different areas of operation, from the flow of traffic in the morning to the safety and well-being of their staff and students. Principals are responsible for cultivating a positive climate at their school and for reaching annual goals. It is literally impossible to strike work-life balance as a principal, and we want to thank them and have them know how much they are appreciated, how much we look forward to their continued growth and service. School leaders and educators are the backbone of society and inspiring dreams and offering encouragement. But in our district, we think of everyone as being leaders in learning, caring, and growing. Student leaders, teacher leaders, parent leaders, and staff leaders, like Mr. French and Ms. Corey from our Business Resources Office, who are once again receiving the ASBO International Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting, or Ms. Whitbeck and Mr. Cook in our Transportation and Operations Department for earning ASBO's Best Practice Awards this spring for School Choice Without Boundaries and an innovative internal pest suppression program. We also want to recognize the leadership of Jeremiah Gallegos, the financial literacy instructor at Collier Business Academy and father of 2 Estrella Vista students, for putting his name in and being selected as a member of Governor Hobbs' Education Retention Task Force out of literally hundreds of applicants. The task force will make recommendations regarding the educator retention crisis in a report due in December of this year by holding ongoing stakeholder meetings and conducting surveys. I know those meetings have already started. It'd be remiss if we didn't congratulate our new National Board certified teacher and the continuing teachers. They were recognized last weekend, I think, in a large room of teachers from across the state of Arizona. And because of the work of the K-12 Center, Arizona continues, I think, to lead the way in National Board teacher certification. You may have heard the Littleton STEM Academy is one of just 30 model schools from across the United States that's been invited to share best practices at the 31st Annual Model Schools Conference. The International Center for Leadership and Education, whose mission is to celebrate, inspire, and support today's K-12 educators, has named Littleton STEM Academy a 2023 model school for its focus on relationships and rigorous and relevant academics to impact students. Faculty and staff at Quinton and Littleton STEM Academies, both model schools, recognize opportunities for growth, foster strong culture, and hold high expectations for everyone. Celebrations to support Kids at Hope are taking place throughout April and May. Different destinations and related to the school's focus. So at Tres Rios, the Pumas will participate in their first ever Kids at Hope Career Day. Students will walk through Tunnel of Hope and enter the day into their future professions in law enforcement, armed services, fire sciences, emergency medical services, all careers focusing on serving the community. Tres Rios partner with WestMec, the Phoenix Fire Department, Maricopa County Sheriff's Department to offer these opportunities. The Mustangs at Country Place are attending their annual Leadership Day, and showcase will include tours, speeches, leadership lessons, and performances. Most importantly, the personal learning opportunities from servant leaders in the community and state. Littleton STEM is partnering with the PTA, student government, and National Junior Honor Society to showcase home, family, hobby, and recreation with family events full of fun. They'll have food trucks, a family dance, vendors, games, prizes, and much more. At the Fine Arts Academy, one student from every grade level is celebrated as a Kids at Hope at their monthly Falcon Fest, and this is a wonderful way to spread the message and belief of hope. Estrella Vista STEM and the Fine Arts Academy celebrate home and family destination with their First Fridays. Parents and community members are invited to attend the monthly Kids at Hope Students at Month celebrations. And at Quinton STEM Academy, the teacher-led committees are eagerly planning Kids at Hope talent showcases in May. Students of all ages will have opportunity to share with us their talents and skills that connect with hobbies and recreation. At the close of the third term, our students hosted student-led conferences for their parents and their families. When the students prepare their materials to explain their progress and strategies for improvement, they demonstrate they understand where they sit with regard to academic standards and reaffirm their commitment for continuous growth. Students created slideshows and shared data binders, notebooks, and class projects to showcase their learning. At Estrella Vista, kindergarten through third grade families received materials to chart and graph progress towards their goals at home, as well as information on early literacy and grade level expectations. The average participation of our schools this spring was 81%, which improved by 4% over last spring. Thank you to all the families who were able to prioritize attendance and with that support a better education for our kids. We hope the participation rate continues to grow. Students at Fine Arts worked extra hard to make their hallways at the site come to life. They painted different characters from Jungle Book, and people who see them may think professional artists were hired. Would you like to see some outstanding art? If you would, you're cordially invited to the Littleton Annual Art Show. That is going to be at Avondale City Hall this year. Join us for the reception on April 19th at 5 p.m. or if you can't make it that day, you have until Tuesday the 25th to admire the pieces, which will be set up in the lobby from students all over the district. The first and second place will be awarded each grade level, and they'll also be selected for each school site. Some pieces will be chosen for purchase. If the student artists and their families agree to sell us those pieces, they'll become part of the artwork collection in the permanent collection here at the district. The Littleton Education Foundation is hosting May the 4th Be With You bowling event on May 4th. This fundraiser event helps bring fun and camaraderie to business and district staff. We look forward to reporting more about that at the May meeting. And of course, they were a tremendous support this year for kids being able to travel on the 3 signature field trips who probably would not have otherwise been able to afford that trip. In closing, I want to express our appreciation to Carmen Gomez and the Quinton PTA for once again donating funds for transportation for field trips, to Cassie Lockhart, Leslie Rogers, Arizona Wynn, Annette Mullins, Rachel Mullins, Rosa Cruz Cova, Samantha Armstrong, and other anonymous donors for the yard games and festival materials donated the value of nearly $1,000, and that's all I have this evening, Madam President.
Thank you, Dr. Freeman. A lot going on. Now we'll turn it over to Ms. Vanderwater for a program showcase.
President Reyes, members of the governing board, Dr. Freeman, and community. Tonight I will be sharing our program showcase outlining our district's 3 signature field trips for our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. Field trips give students the opportunity to learn in a natural environment and experience things firsthand and from primary resources rather than texts, real objects rather than photos. Our Littleton Elementary School District students attended field trips that allowed them to touch, feel, and listen to what they're learning about, which helps them build on classroom instruction, gain a better understanding of topics, build cultural understanding and tolerance, enhance critical thinking, and expose them to worlds outside their own. And for some of our students, these field trips were also the first time a student attended a trip without their parents. So it definitely builds independence and confidence. In Littleton, we offer 3 signature field trips for 6th, 7th, and 8th grades. 6th graders have the opportunity to head north to Prescott, Arizona. Our 7th graders have the opportunity to head to the beaches of California. And our 8th graders can fly across our country to the nation's capital in Washington, D.C., and this year also experience Colonial Williamsburg, Virginia. I'll start with our 6th grade students. They attended Campway in Prescott, Arizona. This camp location was founded in 1941 by Bud and Isabel Brown and became accredited through the American Camp Association. It is now the longest-running family-owned camp in Arizona. To this day, it is still family-owned and operated and continues to turn childhood moments into life's rich memories. The camp is situated on 130 acres of wilderness land backing up to the Prescott National Forest as well as the Bradshaw Mountains. The camp is very well maintained, and our students enjoyed the amenities with newly renovated log cabins, activity rooms, and outdoor wilderness experiences. Our 6th grade students attended Campway for a 3-day, 2-night experience. We took 2 groups in October when the weather is just perfect in Prescott. As you can see, the first trip had 76 students from across 3 of our schools, 6 teacher chaperones, and 9 parent chaperones. When we picked up our first group, we dropped off our second group of 80 students from across 4 of our schools, and we had 5 teacher chaperones as well as 11 parent chaperones. The schedule was full with daytime as well as nighttime activities, and all classes adhered to the next generation science standards, along with each lesson in an accompanying field journal worksheet that reinforces lessons learned back in the classroom. On the screen, you see a list of activities that our students participated, such as nature, hiking, zip lining, archery, campfires, and team building, just to name a few. Here you see the students dissecting owl pellets, one of their favorite activities. I know there's always a challenge to see how many bones they can find in an owl pellet, and it's quite amazing. Next slide, please. Here you see one of our students actually ziplining, if you look closely. Definitely a favorite activity. And we do have a few of our teacher leaders sharing their experiences with us. Ms. Torres said this trip was a great opportunity for students to experience learning science in a new way. I was so happy to see the students enjoy the adventure firsthand. It was a great way to get to know many of the students. Mr. Torres said this trip was a great opportunity for students to experience learning science in a new way. I was so happy to see the students enjoy the adventures firsthand. And Ms. Hansen, Campway is a great way for students who have never traveled outside the city to experience learning in a hands-on and exploratory way. It was a fun and bonding experience as well for staff and students. Our 7th grade students attended Camp Surf in Imperial Beach, San Diego, California. There's nothing else like it in Southern California. 45 acres of beautiful campgrounds right on the Pacific Ocean. This is a YMCA Camp Surf sponsored program, and it's one of a kind. You won't find any other facility like this one anywhere in Southern California. They have Pirates Cove Amphitheater to the McKinney Dining Hall, to their beachy cabins with nautical-themed paradise. Definitely a unique experience, not to mention a quarter-mile of open beachfront for our students to enjoy. This was a 5-day, 4-night experience just this March. And as you can see, we had 49 students, 5 teacher chaperones, and 1 administrator. This schedule did not allow for a lot of sleeping as the students were busy sunrise to sundown participating in a variety of activities. They spent 5 days in hands-on classes such as Marshes Aren't Mellow, Kelp Connections, Hop into Habitats, Jetty Rocks, Critter Skull Investigations, Estuary Exploration, Sea Survival, Orienteering, Beachbound, and so much more. Evening activities provide fun and fellowship for students and teachers. They build trust, confidence through high-energy, challenging experiences in a safe environment. The objectives for the outdoor education classes at YMCA Camp Surf are aligned to both the next generation science standards as well as the Common Core content standards for Arizona. Activities emphasize the development of student perceptions, sensitivities, and awareness to the natural environment. Here you can see our students exploring and having fun in the sand. Definitely a favorite activity. And a few of our amazing students and teacher leaders share their experiences with us. Ms. Chicas, who was our administrator, she said exploring the jetty and finding sea life was the best. Miguel said archery is the best because I got to shoot a bow and arrow and got 2 bullseyes. And Franco shared his favorite part of Camp Surf was the archery as well as the beach time. Our 8th grade students attend a trip to Washington, D.C., and also had the opportunity to go to Colonial Williamsburg, Virginia. We've partnered with World Strides, a company for 6 years now, for our district's annual 8th grade trip to Williamsburg, Jamestown, and also Washington, D.C. They are consistently one of the best student travel companies. We have ease in working with their representatives to consistency in communication, and traveling really makes our World Strides trip really amazing. Our students enjoy the itinerary, the tour leaders, the hotels, and they say the food stops too. This was a 5-day, 4-night experience for our students. We had 43 students from across 8 of our schools, 5 teacher chaperones, 6 parent chaperones, and 1 administrator. Our students, staff, and parents experienced rich history in both of these locations. Some of their activities included touring the U.S. Capitol, where decisions have affected the world, observing the laying of a wreath at Arlington National Cemetery's Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, and exploring the amazing exhibits of the Smithsonian Museums. Our itinerary also included a visit to Williamsburg, a 200-year-old fully functioning town restored to its original colonial design, and Jamestown, the first colony. On this educational student travel program, students discovered the roots of the American story all the way up through our present-day democracy. The connections to classroom learning were vast and rich, and students all received a journal to capture their memories. And to name a few more of those experiences, they had a chance to explore replicas of 3 ships that sailed from England to Virginia. They learned about colonists and in a recreated 17th century fort, and watched historical interpreters at a Powhatan Indian village. Here you see our students exploring history. One's dressed up in a costume from ancient times. Some of the comments was, it was really cold, but really cool. DC helped me to understand my history, and it was so beautiful and wonderful for the opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. As Dr. Freeman mentioned in his comments, we want to show our appreciation for the Littleton Education Foundation. They were able to make a donation across all 3 of these trips of about $32,000. They gave each one of our 6th grade students $40 towards their trip and 8 full scholarships. Our 7th grade students, they had given $425 to each student attending and 20 full scholarships. And for the 8th grade trip, they provided 11 full scholarships at $1,800 each. And each one of our students across all of these grades have an opportunity to make what we call a fast pitch video and record that and send it in to their principal. And then we get that over to the Littleton Education Foundation, and they have an opportunity to watch those videos and using a rubric and some conversation, apply some scholarships. So many of our students who would not be able to attend these trips have an opportunity. We do have a short video for your enjoyment and pictures across all 3 of these trips.
Free as a bird in the sky, that is what you are. Breathe and you know you're alive. Feel the beat of your heart. be there with you no matter where you go. Life is a table for two, and we're starting the show. Well, I'm gonna spread my wings and fly so high up above the clouds. You know that time doesn't wait for your dreams. We're living right here and now. Don't wait for tomorrow. Live for today. Keep chasing the sun.
Thank you.
Thank you. It would be remiss of me if I didn't at least touch on Camp Surf. I attended Camp Surf when I was much younger, and my son was actually in 7th grade. And I can tell you from firsthand the impact that these trips have. There was kids that had never been to the ocean. There was kids that never had camped over. And the impact of something like this, I don't really think we realize how valuable it is. My son is 40 now. He'd die if I said that out loud. But to this day, once in a while, we'll talk about it and how much fun it was. So it is a long-lasting one of those life events. So I hope we can continue these and possibly even more in the future as we continue to raise money. It is a very valid experience. So thank you. It made me feel young.
Thank you.
So at this time, I'm asking if we have, I do believe we have a call to the public. There is one call to the public, thank you. And it is it Candy Chambers? Is that correct? Thank you. And if I may, while you're walking up to the podium, I will read our disclaimer. And that is, according to the Arizona Open Meeting Law, any matter brought before the board by members of the audience may not be acted upon at this meeting. There is a 3-minute time limit that we ask that you stick to, please, in order to give anyone else that may wish to make comments. No name-calling, personal attacks upon board members, staff personnel, or other persons in attendance or absent will be permitted by individuals who address the board. In addition, if there's any comments or questions that are currently under legal review, they will not be accepted. We do direct you to the governing board policies if you have any additional questions involving personnel, and thank you for coming. So at this time, I'll turn the platform over to you.
Thank you. Good evening, President, Superintendent, board members. My name is Candy Chambers, and I'm a grandparent of former students of the Littleton School District. Yes. Maybe I need to get closer. Should I say all that again? All right. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Candy Chambers, and I am the grandparent of former Littleton students. I recently withdrew my grandchildren on March 22nd, and I'm not as prepared as I'd like to be today, but I need to say this. Today, we were able to meet with the Executive Director of Leadership for the Littleton School District, and we were discussing, where I started was with this. I've read that the vision of Littleton Elementary School District is that we are leading in learning, caring, and growing, and with trust, respect, integrity, collaboration, and dedication. Learning opportunities must be designed to develop the person's potential in the areas of academic ability and vocational awareness, cultural appreciation, physical well-being, social development, and community contribution. However, we're here today with concerns of discrimination, gross neglect, inappropriate behavior, failure to protect, falsified documents, criminalization, and defamation of character by the members of the faculty and staff at Country Place Leadership Academy and the Littleton School District, preceding and following the egregious racial assault against my grandson, where he was spat in the face and called a monkey by a white student. I asked why weren't racial assaults viewed as a big deal? Because we've been dealing with this since this particular event happened on February 14th. And it was just today that I was able to meet with someone representing the district. My family has been affected. My grandson and granddaughter have been affected horrendously by this. And I hear that certain members want to handle this or take care of this for us immediately, but we're 2 months later, and we've been run around to this meeting and that meeting and basically pushed aside. So what I'm here to just request of Littleton, even though my children are no longer here, they're still Black and brown children in this district that need to be protected. They need to feel like people care for them. Am I
So-
running out of time?
Yes, ma'am. I'm going to give you about 35 more seconds, if
very
I may.
much.
Thank you.
All right, and just in closing, we're just looking, we have here our family advocate from the Black Mothers Forum, who has been here to support our family, and we thank God for them. But what we're looking forward to is for the district to do better with addressing these types of issues with the care, trust, respect, integrity, collaboration, and dedication, as you mentioned in your core values. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming forward. As stated earlier, any matter brought before the board may not be acted upon on this meeting. So with that, next we have consent agenda. And is there anything that needs to be pulled from the consent agenda? Hearing none, I will ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda as is.
I move the governing board approve the items submitted for consent.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion will pass unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to number 10, Dr. Haid, this one looks like it's yours.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Tonight, the administration is bringing 2 recommendations for principal this evening. We conducted a paper screening process that produced 11 diverse applicants for consideration as principals in the district. There were multiple rounds in the selection process, which included initial screening interviews with executive members, performance activities, and community input. Recommendations for 2 of our openings are both internal candidates this evening. I'd like to start with our recommendation for the Estrella Vista STEM Academy, replacing Dr. Durazo, who will be headed over to Lakin Prep. Principal recommendation for Estrella Vista STEM Academy is Miss Samantha Armstrong. She began in the district in 2014 and has served as a teacher, a coach, and an assistant principal. She has contributed to the success of 3 of the academies in the district, Tres Rios, Quentin, and Littleton. She has taken advantage of both learning and leading opportunities here and has most recently been supervised and mentored by Mr. Eric Atuhini. She has a passion for making teachers successful and engaging their students. She is motivated to learn and grow, as she has already shown in her various roles in the district. So this evening, we'd like to recommend Ms. Samantha Armstrong. I'm going to ask the board to make 2 motions so that they can each come and speak to you as is customary. So if you would like to recommend Ms. Samantha Armstrong as principal for Estrella Vista STEM Academy for school year 2023-2024.
Okay, is there a motion? We'll have 2 separate motions, correct? That's what you're asking? Thank you.
Yes, Madam
This
President.
motion would be for Samantha Armstrong, correct? Thank you. So is there a motion?
I motion the governing board,
Approve.
approve Samantha Armstrong as the principal of Estrella Vista STEM Academy.
Thank you. So there is a motion to approve. Ms. Armstrong, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, welcome aboard. And it's a good thing you're ready, because I see your little speech in your hand.
Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Freeman, executive team, and Littleton community, I am honored to be selected as the principal of Estrella Vista STEM Academy, and I appreciate this remarkable opportunity. As a product myself of Arizona Public Schools, having completed my education in both the Cartwright and Phoenix Union High School districts, this is definitely an honor not only for myself, but for my family as well. I am excited to bring the knowledge I've gained from my amazing mentors here in the district and to continue to grow as a leader and learner focused on design thinking and engineering, not only for our current reality, but for our future as well. Thank you very much.
Oh. 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 Get in there and get close. That's awesome. Thank you. We'll try and get your name up on that big marquee that everyone in Avondale and Buckeye can see.
Madam President, our second principal recommendation tonight is for the Quinton STEM Academy, and that's Mrs. Carrie Chikas. She began in the district in 2018, and she has served as both the dean and the assistant principal for Quinton. She has been successful in her roles as she moved progressively through the levels of leadership there. She has taken advantage of leadership opportunity and has been supervised and mentored by both Mr. Eric Atuhini and Dr. Lonnie Fife, who is here to support her this evening. She is strong in building relationships, including those with the community. Her ability to collaborate and communicate with multiple stakeholders made her highly recommended by both the Quinton staff and her colleagues. And it is our honor to recommend Mrs. Carrie Chikas for the principal at Quinton STEM Academy for the 2023-2024 school year.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
I move the governing board approve Ms. Carrie Chikas for principal at Quinton STEM Academy for the 2023-24 school year.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Hearing a first and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, welcome aboard.
Good evening, President Reyes, members of the board, Dr. Freeman, members of the executive team, and the Littleton community. I'm truly honored to be selected as the principal of Quinton STEM Academy. I started my journey with Quinton 5 years ago, and moving from Dean of Students then to AP, I'm truly excited for this principal opportunity. Quinton has been my family, and I looked forward to many more years. I'm truly grateful for the leadership of Mr. Atuhini and Dr. Fife, and I look forward to working with all of you. Thank you so much.
Photoshop family. Dr. Hayde, looks like you're going to continue with number 11.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. The item this evening is an action item after you considered information and made some recommendations at the last meeting. We took your information, gathered feedback from the LEAP committee as well as the LEA and smaller informal groups about the changes we're recommending this evening. So in item A, we tried to group these together a little differently than we did last time. So we have job descriptions, duties, and grades. We have 2 job description recommendations for you this evening. One is for media center clerk. That title that I brought before you last time was distribution clerk, as we were trying to work with the library clerks in our district, and they did not like the title. So after hearing feedback, we tried a different title, and we think this one will be more amenable for them. The basic change for this is to just include all of the media center duties that they have. That is not including instruction as a library specialist or a master's degree in library science would have. And so this is our standard job description format, and so that is part of 11A for this evening. The second job description we're bringing before you this evening is for the health aide. And so, as I said last time, many of the health offices now, we have health aides in, and they are helping to aid our children and our staff with minor medical issues, distribute medication and things like that. And so our original health aide description was more for the classroom. So we revamped this so it would be more accurate to their duties that they're having, and so that is the second job description that we're bringing before you this evening. Are there any questions about either of those before I change into one of the other things on letter A? Thank you. The second piece that we have that I think, if Mr. Verrill, would you pull up the pay grade crosswalk? So there was considerable discussion with the board and with groups about changing the pay grade levels and how difficult that is, and the compression issues that we had. And so this is an overview of the old pay grade with the new pay grade next to it, the old base placement and the new base placement. So we felt like this would be a good piece of information for the board to see that no job is going down in base placement, but rather going up. And this will really help us with compression issues. So this is a crosswalk. The other pieces associated with the salary and the family grades are in another item. So, Madam President, members of the board, we're asking you this evening to approve the job descriptions and pay grades as presented before we go on to item B.
So just so I'm clear what we're following, we addressed A, B, and?
Just A.
Just A. Okay, thank you. I needed that clarity. So
Yes, ma'am.
hearing that, is there a motion? Do you need those motions read separately?
I think it would be provide more clarity,
For
yes.
the record, yes, I agree. So I'll need a motion for A, 11A, job descriptions, duties, and grades.
Job descriptions and pay grades as presented, yes.
Yes, ma'am.
I move the governing board approve the job descriptions and pay grades as presented. Nay.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion will pass. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. 11B is compensation and placement schedules. After we looked at the 2 for classified and certified at the last meeting, we then developed 2 other placement schedules based on feedback that the board gave and the other groups that I mentioned earlier. So attached to this item is the classified schedule and the family group. That was one of the things last time we looked at the schedule, and we needed the second page, so they're both there. Mr. Verrill, will you open up the classified schedule attachment, please? as you can see on this one, it might be sort of hard to see on the screen, but one of the pieces of feedback we got was, where do you start if you add these together? And so we added some description, as you might see on step consideration. All placements begin on step 1, and additional steps will be determined based on the criteria below. So you start with 1 and add the other pieces, and 5 is the furthest that you can move over. We hope that helps. We had several people look at this, and then we worked on the other ones that we can take a look at. Does this help with the questions that we had last time? Okay. We did the same with the certified salary schedule, but instead of saying step, we used cell. The two that you haven't seen this evening, we also corrected the years of experience. So we think that will help with the marketing of our positions and our actual salary that's given. The two new ones are the related services schedule. So related services are psychologists, speech therapists, occupational therapists, and physical therapists. They have been on a separate schedule for a long time, but we included them in this placement. This particular one takes into account the education and their experience. So on this particular piece, they start on the cell that correlates to their educational attainment and then build on their years of experience. This has made a bigger difference when you look at our schedule compared to our competitor schedule, so people can say, yes, that's a place not only where I want to be for the culture, but also for compensation. And the final schedule this evening is the administrative placement schedule. This also, all placements begin on step 1. Take into consideration education, years of experience, and language ability. And this would complete the entire package of our outward-facing placement schedules for all employee groups. And so we are asking the board this evening to approve the compensation and placement schedules as presented.
Okay.
Yes.
So is there questions on 11B before I ask for a motion? Hearing none, I'll need a motion for 11B, compensation and placement schedules.
I move the governing board approve the compensation and placement schedules as presented.
Thank you.
A second.
Thank you very much. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion will pass. Thank you. Moving on to C, stipends and,
Addenda schedule.
thank you.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. There's one attachment to this. It has changed based on feedback from our LEA group. We had put some of the, I would call them hot buttons on the placement schedule, but we didn't replicate them on the stipend and addenda schedule. And what we found out is that internal people thought they didn't get that unless they got hired on new. So this matches both documents. There's nothing new. But we also have a question usually, which stipends are paid out across all of their pays and which ones are paid after the completion. And so those X's in that middle column, and there's a key at the bottom, those pieces are the ones that are paid out across their, we call it spread pay, or their 24 or 26 schedules. So that makes it easier for our employees internally to know when they're getting paid for their certificates, endorsements, approved areas, or assignments and extracurricular activities. So we would like a motion to approve the stipend and addenda schedule, please.
Is there questions? Yes.
For additional workdays, just to clarify, is that like if they work an extra day, or does it have to be like a certain amount of days that they work extra?
Members Cenaceros, it is for each additional day. So if there's an opportunity that we hire someone in mid-year, like a teacher, we could pay them like on a Saturday to come and set up their classroom if they're willing to do that. So it gives us a vehicle to compensate them for days outside of their contract.
Any more questions on 11C? Hearing none, I'll ask for a motion, please.
I move the governing board approve stipends and amended for fiscal year 2023-2024.
Thank you.
And I'll second that.
Thank you. Hearing a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, 11C will pass. Thank you. Moving on to 11D, driver incentive pilot.
Finally, Madam President, members of the board, we're asking you to approve a pilot driver incentive program for drivers who use no more than 16 hours or the equivalent of 2 full workdays or more than 4 sets of routes per quarter to be eligible to receive a $250 attendance incentive. We're asking for this pilot to begin in the 4th quarter of this year and continue through fiscal year 24, so that at that time we may bring data back to the board to determine if this is something that we want to continue. So we're asking the governing board to approve a pilot bus driver attendance incentive to begin for the 4th quarter in fiscal year 23 and extend through fiscal year 24.
Thank you. Is there questions? Hearing none, I will ask for a motion.
I motion the governing board approve a pilot bus driver attendance incentive to begin for the 4th quarter in fiscal year 23 and extend through fiscal year 24.
Thank you.
And I'll second that.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Myself, I'm opposed to that. So for the record, I don't believe you incentivize people to come to work. So with that, the motion will pass 3-1. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we're moving on to Mr. French, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the governing board, Dr. Freeman, Littleton community. Last meeting, we talked a little bit about compensation. Jim, if you could bring up the slides, please. And we asked for some feedback from the board. What I tried to do this evening was take that feedback and provide some more scenarios or some more information to the board. We are planning, this is a discussion item, so we do plan on bringing this back again in May. Hopefully at that point we'll have some more information from the legislature, some more information about what the budget may be looking like. But for now, we are going to give you kind of our assumptions or best guesses and provide you some information as to possible compensation that we believe we can afford going into next fiscal year. So these are our budget revenue assumptions. We'll first start with the 2% inflation. That is required by state statute. I think we know inflation was more towards the 6 or the 7%. There is a statute that says that it's the CPI or 2%, whichever is less. So unfortunately, 2% is required by law, but that's kind of the number we can take to the bank. We are also assuming some modest enrollment growth. We had our demographer provide us a report and looking at households, the growth of the area. We're assuming a weighted average daily membership growth of roughly 200. If we take a look at that, that would increase our budget by roughly $700,000. We also got news recently that the Classroom Site Fund is going to be increasing by $50 per weighted student count. That came out from the JLBC recently. That would increase the Classroom Site Fund, give us new money of roughly $330,000. We go to the next slide. These are our budgeted expense assumptions. So we know that we are going to have increased expenditures. Employee benefits was one of those. We brought employee benefits to the board a couple of months back. The district is covering roughly a 12% increase to employee medical benefits. That's estimated to cost the district roughly $200,000. There will be a property liability premium increase. The trust, who is our insurer, is increasing the general liability insurance by roughly 1%. I think cyber liability is going up 10%. That's just from the nature of all of the claims that have been going on statewide. The property itself isn't going up, but they are asking that we increase the value of the assets by roughly 15%. So we're estimating that all of those factors combined is going to it costs the district roughly $50,000. And then ASRS, which is the retirement system, is increasing this coming fiscal year, which we're assuming is also going to cost us roughly $50,000. So $300,000 in costs that we're taking out of that first revenue line that we saw earlier. If we were to look at providing all staff a 1% raise, it would cost the district approximately $317,000. We got a question from the board the last meeting about our budget balance carry forward. So these are our one-time funds. I wanted to provide the board some information here as well. I provided the last 3 years of budgets as well as the budget balance carry forward that we brought forward. The reason I did 3 years is because this is really the prime time that we're looking at some of the ESSER funding. We know that budget balance carry forward was capped when prior year funding was in place for school districts a number of years back at 4%. And after the legislature went to current year funding, which means we're funded on the kids we have in the seat this year, which is really an unknown for the districts because we really don't know who's going to be coming for next year, so it's hard for us to estimate. They removed that 4% cap, so we are able to carry forward a little additional money to account for unexpected expenses. If you look over the last 3 years, we've increased our budget balance carry forward, and there's a reason why we've done that. With the ESSER funds, we put quite a few positions into those funds, and we're going to slowly start introducing those back into the M&O balance or the M&O budget. So we built up that budget balance carry forward to absorb those once they come back in. We moved some of those back into this fiscal year, and we'll move the majority of those back into next fiscal year. Jim, if we go to the next slide. So what we have looked at right now is that we have a couple of scenarios to talk with the board about. We currently pay an admin and classified performance pay and contract signing incentive from our M&O account, and we would propose to move that to the new classroom site fund money that we talked about earlier. That would increase flexibility by in M&O by approximately $245,000. This would allow the district to do a 2% increase for all staff. Initially, we thought we weren't going to be able to do that with just 2% from the legislature because we were going to have to take into account items like benefits, ASRS increases, as well as the property and liability increases. It would leave approximately $25,000 for increases in utility costs, and we would be able to absorb other inflationary costs like fuel and materials from the budget balance carry forward that we saw earlier. I was also asked to bring a longevity option before the board. This would cost, if this was an ongoing, this would be an alternative to the 1% of that projected raise. This would affect roughly 300 staff. And what we would do is look at $500 for every 5 years completed at the district. So starting your 6th year through your 10th year, you get 500, and you kind of go down that list all the way to 30 plus years. If we wanted to look at something like this, we would be doing a 1% increase for everybody and then instituting a longevity option. Next slide, Jim. One-time budget considerations, these would be monies that we could use out of that budget balance carry forward without affecting it too much. We could also, if we wanted to keep the 2% for all staff, we could do a longevity program at $300 per tier that we looked at earlier. And that could come out of one-time budget considerations. That would be roughly 0.5%. And we could look at bringing that in possibly if the legislature appropriates more than the 2% further on down the road, or even next year if we feel like we can absorb that into M&O without disrupting programs, could bring that back to the board. If we didn't want to do that and we did 1% to all staff with a longevity program, we could also give 0.5% to all staff out of one-time money, which would be approximately $250 to all staff. Go ahead, Jim. We did this last year, and we thought it worked very well. And given the political environment of us not knowing exactly where the legislature is going to land on a budget, we are floating the option of anything above the 2%, providing a 0.75% increase to staff for every 1% over the 2, if that makes sense. So I know that the governor has a budget out there, would really like to get up to 4. I think the Republicans and the legislature, the House and the Senate have proposed like a 2% increase. So we're hoping it lands somewhere in the middle there. But this would give us a vehicle to provide raises once we know what that final number is. Unfortunately, we're not expecting that number till possibly June 30th. So with that, I'd open it up to any questions, comments from the board. Again, like I said, this is a discussion item with the board, so we'd love to hear any comments that the board has, and we would be making a recommendation most likely in the May meeting going forward.
All right, hearing that presentation, I'll open the floor up for questions. If I may, I'll start. I have several. So some of it I'm going to ask you again because I think I understand, but I'm not sure. Okay, so I apologize for you having to repeat yourself. So let's start with 1%, right? I think where you proposed possibly 1% if that's what it was going to look like. And then you went on to talk about a 2% increase. I mean, 1% is really, I mean, depending on how people feel, that's almost it's for some people it's a slap in the face. Mm-hmm. It's very embarrassing. So definitely I'd like to look at all options. So for me personally, and I'm just speaking, 1%'s off the table. If you that's tax, and you don't even see it. Yes, sir. Do you have a question?
Yeah, Madam President. So there's not the closest thing in here to a proposal is the 2% increase
For all staff?
with which we can afford by taking all the performance pay out of the classroom site fund. The 1% is there for you to know if you wanted to give longevity, for instance, right? So the base budget is 2% raise. If you wanted to give a 1% raise and a 1% longevity, then the 1 + 1 would equal 2. It's there not as a proposal, it's an option. If we, for instance, had 3% new money, you could do 2% to a raise plus 1 to longevity. If we had 4% money, you could do 3% to a raise plus 1 for longevity, or put all 4%. That plan represents the same budget amount as 1% of a raise. So you know what one longevity proposal would cost. Let's say there's 4% for raises, but we want to give longevity. Longevity would cost 1%. Now we can only give 3% for raises.
Thank you, but I'm still confused. But thank you. If I may, I'm just going to ask in my mind how I'd understand it.
Okay.
Thanks.
Well, we want to try to put together options for next time. So as you
Gotcha.
guys talk, that will help us.
Yeah, I don't even
figure out.
kind of understand what you just said, to be honest, so I'm going to go back again. So the longevity option is part of that proposal that would be 1%? Do I have that right? I'm just trying to understand what we're doing, and I'm very.
So,
confused.
Madam
If you guys get
President-
it, please speak up, because right now. I'm
Madam
confused.
President, the plan for us tonight was just to bring you information.
Okay.
So the board asked, what would a longevity incentive program cost? About the same as 1% raise.
Okay,
And so
I
you
got
can choose, do
Okay.
you want to give it as base or do you want to give it as
I
longevity?
understand now.
It's going to come down,
1% is equal to longevity as laid out here on this slide, correct?
that $500
Gotcha.
increment
Okay,
equals 1%. When you count how many of our employees are in each of those categories and add it all up, it adds up to the same as.
thank you. For some reason, a light bulb moment. All right, so my question is, when you look at longevity pay, depending on when you were hired, right? Is this subject to ASRS, and is this calculated in the calculations in terms of total cost?
Madam President, what we had discussed in executive team, this would be a separate, like a stipend.
Right, one-time
It does
stipend.
count in your ASRS, and it would have contributions taken from that.
Okay, that's what I thought. And then you figured your match on top of that, which creates the total cost, correct?
Yes.
Madam
Okay,
President.
so that's in there. Good, okay. And then, how many employees do we have? So as an example, is the majority of our employees from 6 to 10 years? I can't imagine we have many in 30-plus years.
Madam President, we did look at that.
Because how do you know it's equal to 1% if you don't know how many you
We
have?
did. We did pull the information out of our employee information system. We have roughly 200 employees that would qualify for that 6 to 10-year stipend at the moment. If we were to take the group as a whole, it was about 300 employees out of the total of roughly 650 would qualify.
So you looked at that as, what if I've been here 4 years, I don't get anything?
No, Madam President. Under this plan, you would have to complete 5 years prior to you receiving a longevity stipend.
If I'm doing the longevity stipend as the issue versus if I've been here 4 years, I could get 1% equal to this.
Correct.
Okay, got it. All right. Any questions? I can keep going, but I don't,
Yeah, just for clarity, anybody under 5 years would get, if we were to give 1% plus longevity, they would only get the 1%.
understand. I got it now. Thank you.
I just want, has this been shown? I know we have the LEAP committee and our LEA. Has these been shown to them? Is there a thing that they would like between these, the governing board, to do?
Member Cincineros, this has not gone to LEAP or LEA. This was numbers that I put together from the last board meeting and wanted to share with you.
Madam President, Member Cisneros, the LEA said they were interested in a longevity plan, and so did the board. So this is a costing model, and it's for discussion. It's not for action tonight. So we picked two numbers this evening for you to look at. So one was, what's a longevity set increment that's equal to 1%? So you clearly in your head can say, we can give a base raise or we can give longevity. The other was a one-time longevity amount, which, I don't know which slide.
Number 8?
Yeah, the last slide, a 300 tier, which is $250 to all employees, or $300 to the tier, which is roughly 0.5%. And we could probably afford to do that one time, not ongoing. So whatever we build into ongoing stays with the employee. So if let's say they had 7 years and we made longevity recognition permanent. The 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th year, they're gonna get $1,000. But then the 11th year, it bumps up because we've made it permanent. If you make it one time, then it's a separate line on their paycheck. It goes in one time and comes out. So we can do the 2%, and then we can maybe do something one time. But we can't do 2% plus 1% right now. Maybe if the legislature comes up with more money. So it's an either or question. And what we do essentially is back into the number. How much is 1%, and what would longevity look like at that amount? Or how much is remainder from classroom site fund that we could give one time, and that would be $300 per tier instead of 5. So this is all working with projected budget numbers and not saying there's anything special about 500 or 300. It's just the way the math works to help you understand what trade-offs you might be making for compensation.
Other questions?
I just want to make sure I'm understanding this, the longevity program at $300 for the tier, and then $250 to all employees. That would include all employees, even those that are under the 5 years, correct?
Madam President and Member Contreras, essentially $300 a tier means that about a third or 40% of the people are going to get longevity and 60% are going to get nothing, right? That would be equivalent to $250 per person. So So 60% of the people aren't going to get $250 so that you can do longevity at $300. That's the trade-off. Is that right?
Yeah, Madam President, Member Contreras, these are not together. So the longevity program, these are all one-time considerations, so we could either do the longevity at 300 for those 300 people that qualify, or we could do 250 to all employees if we decided to do the longevity program continuing, if that makes sense.
Either or.
Correct.
Well, could we do a one-time base salary increase and then a longevity option?
Madam President, Member Cisneros, you could do any combination of one-time and ongoing. The recommendation of the admin team is you don't mess with people's base salaries and reduce them in a future year. Once you put that into their base compensation, you want to be able to keep that commitment. So we believe that longevity, stipends, one-time money, you can put it out there and say, don't add to your mortgage. You can go buy a new washer and dryer, but don't take out a 5-year car payment. And so the board could put any combination of one-time and ongoing plan into place. We wouldn't want to put at risk people's base salary and have to try to claw it back in a future year.
Absolutely. Putting anything in base and taking it away doesn't work very well.
Could, mathematically.
Well, mathematically, but I mean, if I see you touching my base after I have my base, it just doesn't feel good. So, no, I think that is,
Technically possible.
So
everything's possible.
if I'm
yes.
clearly, I asked if we could, so as of right now, I'm just trying to understand. So we're proposing a 2%. We could either do a 2% increase to base salary, and that's all we could do, and nothing else. And I think the question I was asking is, how would anyone be open to doing a 1% increase, and then having a one-time bonus? Could that be doable, or was that what I was?
But if you were going to do a one-time stipend and a one-time to base, right? That's what you're asking. Why would you just not give 2% and leave it in your base?
Exactly.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it would seem, just based on what is being said, that the 2% increase across the board will be the most clean option. It would just seem like that way people kind of know what they're expecting, and it kind of incentivizes people to come on because they know that they're going to get that. Whereas if it's just a one-time, it would seem as if, or if it's, you're just missing the bar because you don't have that longevity that you need, that's going to become, frustrating, disheartening to people. So the 2%, just to clarify, the 2% is across the board. There's no pulling straws. It's just 2%. Okay, thank you. I just need.
Well, Madam President, it would be 2%. There's a number of options that we can do. 2% for everybody, right? 1% for everybody and 1% for some people, which would be part of that longevity that we talked about. The board could go and say 0 increase, and and you give everything in longevity, we would double those numbers. But we also have a one-time option that we would be able to afford. So if we did 2%, we could do a small nod to longevity and then see if we could maintain it in the budget in coming years. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, this is really confusing, but I think we got it. So you could do a 2% all across the board. Everybody gets 2% period into discussion. Then, depending on what your numbers come back and how you do, you could then also do a one-time incentive of X, whatever that would look like based on your predictions of all the monies coming in, right?
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, that would be great. I mean, what would be the drawbacks to doing that? If we can support 2%, which I think you said we can, and continue that down the line, it's a guaranteed 2%. The only thing I had a question is when you showed I'm gonna use the rate table, whatever you call it, that included already some longevity pay, right? Because if I'm here, it's a point or whatever the value was in your rate table, I already get some credit moving across because I've been here X amount of time. Did that not include that?
So, Madam President, remember, we just did placement schedules, so the min-max that we were all used to. So that 2% would, if the board would decide to do that, would go all the way across for every employee currently here. not taking into consideration new employees coming in because that's on the placement chart.
Gotcha. Okay, so it wouldn't affect that at all. Okay.
Well, and Madam President, members of the board, if you did longevity as a one-time plan, it's never assumed to be inherited.
Right.
Let's just say there was a downturn in the classroom site fund or something. You could say, okay, longevity is going to be 450 this year by 5-year brackets, or longevity is going to be 479, because that's what the budget will allow. What we kind of envision to bring back to you next time is, like, we're good with 2%, and anything one time you can do above that, given what you know right now. But what if the governor and the legislature give us 3%? Would you want any of that to be longevity? Like, the board would say, we want to get to 3% before we start giving out longevity, because we're going to do trigger language. Remember, the trigger is anything above 2 goes 75%. So when we do trigger language, which our attorney wants us to do before we start writing checks, so it's not a gift of public funds later. When we go to do trigger language, we're going to say from 2 to 3 is longevity. Anything above 3 goes back into the base. Or from 2 to 3 goes into the base. Anything above 3 can go into longevity. So those would be the kind of question scenarios for trigger language that we would want you all to give us guidance on at a future meeting.
Well, I mean, what I hear, correct me, is that we want whatever the highest level we can give, however you want to phrase it, in base. Because base makes people feel valued, and base, it gives you that structure.
With
So,
longevity, some people don't get as much money.
right. So we're trying to build base, right? We're always saying, we have struggle keeping people. So the more we can build the base and give them, it sounds like, I know we're not voting, but it sounds like whatever you bring back, I think the goal would be to build the base, whatever you can build it, and then make the trigger language smaller. Yeah, so if it's only longevity at 100, okay, it's 100, but the base got to be 3. I think that's the goal, because that gives every single person in the district an opportunity to get equal across the board.
We could come up with some kind of graduated plan that kind of eases into longevity, if you want.
Yeah, the only thing with that is, if you're working here and you don't get anything until the graduated is 5 or 7, I mean, sometimes it's just an incentive enough not to stay. If over there they're paying, $3 more an hour, we would have to know how many people fit in those graphs. So if it's 3 to 5 and 70% of the school fits, it might not be the same issue as if we don't know that it's 40, 30, whatever it is. So maybe you could bring those numbers back too, and it would give us some idea of how many people are being left out of that graduated table. Any other suggestions, thoughts, directions?
I just definitely agree with that. I think that, like, where we are as a consensus, Mr. French, is that we just wanted to be as clean as possible, giving as many people as much as they can possibly get, just like straight, because that's going to bring people in, that's going to motivate them, and anything extra is incentive, is great, but when you know that you have that base and your base can be increased and you kind of can depend upon that, that gives people a sense of comfort, and that makes people stay.
Appreciate that feedback. I think simple's probably the good way to go.
This was a little confusing. I think simple is good. All right, well, thank you very much for the presentation. We appreciate it. We know it's always a difficult topic.
We want you to be confused when you're not voting.
I know. Yeah. All right, so it sounds like you're still up.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the governing board, Dr. Freeman, Littleton community. This evening, I would like to bring up Randy Stein. She is a partner at Stiefel, the district's financial advisor. We are bringing this before the board because we are looking at possibly going out for a M&O, maintenance and operations override election this November. So Randy will provide us information regarding the potential impact to the tax rate, history of the program, prior M&O overrides, and answer any questions from the board. Andy?
Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Madam President, members of the governing board, and Dr. Freeman, thank you for having me here this evening to talk about the possibility of an M&O override for the district in November of 2023. A brief, am I driving? Thank you. That'll do it, right?
Jim's driving, so you just have the.
Thank you, thank you. So a brief overview of M&O overrides in the state. State law does allow a school district to have an override, which is equal to up to 15% of its revenue control limit for M&O purposes. Authority to have an override has to be approved by your voters at a November election, and the revenue to fund the override is levied annually as a secondary property tax. M&O overrides may be authorized for up to 7 years. They do have a phase-out component in years 6 and 7. An override election that is held in November of 23 starts in fiscal year 24-25. The next slide, thank you. The next slide is a picture of the district's current M&O override. I've identified this both by year as well as the phase-out components. So the last election that was held in the Littleton School District was in November of 2019. So the first full year of that override was fiscal year 2021. You can see the approximate amount of that override, just over $5 million that year, and the tax rate just under $1.70 per $100 of taxable property value. Years 2 and 3, we're currently in year 3 of that override. Again, that override is generating approximately $5.3 million. The tax rate has declined somewhat, which is not unusual over time, to about $1.47. Fiscal year 24, there's nothing you can do about the override for fiscal year 24. The election in 2019 is what governs that. I've kind of graded out there because that's not actual data anymore. That is a little bit of an estimate, but for fiscal 24, we're projecting your override right at about $5.6 million and your property tax rate for the override at approximately $1.40. Without any action, no election this year, fiscal 24 again will be a full year of the override. And fiscal 25-26 is where you will start to see the phase out. So I've identified if in fact it did phase out, that the override amount that year at 2/3 would be $4.1 million. The tax rate would drop to approximately 91 cents, and you would be missing approximately $2 million of the full override. By the time you got to fiscal 27-28, the override would be 0. Again, this is what it looks like without any action whatsoever. Any questions?
Would you prefer us to ask questions as you go along or wait to
Please,
the end?
yes.
Okay. Is there any questions? I have none on this one. Thank you.
Great, thank you. On the next slide, this is what an override election would look like in November of 2023. The first full year would be fiscal 24-25. So yes, the override starts over again in the year following the election. A 15% of the RCL would be on the ballot, approximately $8.5 million with an estimated tax rate of 1.47. The estimated average value home in the district for tax purposes is about $131,000. So the estimated tax impact is $193, which is exactly what your taxpayers are paying now with a monthly impact of $16.
I have a question on that side. So, where do you get your average valued home? Is that, because I don't know any home for $131,000
Oh,
anymore.
I am so glad you asked that. Can I put that question off for 2 slides?
You can do whatever you
Okay.
like, ma'am. Thank you.
This is a phenomenon that is being realized across the state, and I get virtually those exact words pretty frequently. I don't know any house that, yes. And that will be the slide after this. Thank you. So this is a historical look at the override election results in this district over the last 20 years. And what is notable here is that every single one of them has passed. I will also point out to you that you will see that in 2003 and 2007, both years you had 2 questions on the ballot, and neither time was that in November. State law has changed since then. It used to be that there were 2 different overrides. One was a 10%, one was a 5%. This district was fortunate enough to have had approval from its voters for both of those in 2003, and then again in 2007. The state law changed. Both things happened. You were able to combine the 2 overrides for a single 15% of the RCL override, and state law now mandates that that election happen in November. I will also observe for you that you actually have pretty notable pass rates. Anything over the, kind of 55% level is really quite impressive. There are places in the state, school districts that literally may be passing by, just literally a handful of votes. So good pass rate and all approvals from your voters in the last 20 years.
Do you think recession plays a role in coming out in November?
There's a lot of issues that I think impact elections. Yes, I do think the economy impacts elections. There's a lot of discussion about odd year versus even year elections, and some people think that an odd year is better. Other people feel like an even year is better. I think it's also pretty district specific, and whether that's the relationship that your district has with your community, the type of community that you have, I think that can also impact it. This would be what they call a continuation election. You would not have phased down. You would just continue with the same override that you currently have. And my collection of data over about the last 20 years indicates that continuation overrides are more likely to pass across the state than a new override or an increased override.
And one more question: when you take these pass rates into consideration, if your city that you live in is taking a huge increase in water, sewer, and others, is timing, in your professional opinion, is that timing play a key role in it or not?
The other items on the ballot clearly play a role, and it can be from voter fatigue. When you have a long ballot, you have to turn it over. The counties hate it if they have to go on to a second page. You just lose so many people when you have to go on to a second page. It can also be what items are on the ballot, which is why some people's theory is that they fear the even year elections, because that's the time when there will be state propositions on the ballot.
Right.
November of 23, we won't have that.
Okay.
Well, what could be on the ballot statewide in November of 24? It could be related to education. It might be related to the aggregate expenditure limit. That might play well for a school district, but there'll be a presidential election also, and we have no idea what else could be proposed by the legislature or could be initiated by the people that would also wind up on the ballot in November of 24. So some people fear the 24 election.
Gotcha.
For a number of reasons, the length of it, being one of them. So yeah, there's pros and cons on both sides.
Thank you.
And then, Madam President, to your specific question. So what I've identified for you here, I told you that the average property value, residential property value for tax purposes, was approximately $131,000. Because of the phase that we are in the real estate market, in a lot of places across the state, we are seeing a very big discrepancy between the taxable value that's used for tax purposes by the assessor and market value. So what you initially said was, I don't know any house that you can, buy around here for $131,000. Well, how I do this is I kind of hunt and peck around and I find properties. These are actually, you don't have the precise addresses here. I've just left you the street names. But these are actual properties where I found the limited property value for tax purposes that is approximately your average. I'm also showing you what the assessor identifies as the full cash value. You can see that there's a big difference there in each of those three properties, and why that is the Constitution limits the growth of the limited property value, which is the one we use for tax purposes, to 5%. So if your property has not changed, your limited property value will not increase more than 5% a year. The full cash value is a little bit more akin to market value, and so that number could increase substantially more from year to year, but that's not the number that's used for tax purposes. And then the other thing I do is I use Zillow, and I find the address and I identify what the Zestimate is to give you a better sense of what the market value may be for those properties. So this property on West Tonto Street in Avondale, for tax purposes, it is assessed at $134,000. But Zillow is identifying it at $388,000 as a market value. And again, that's a function of where we are in the real estate market. This was not the case in 2010. In 2010, the limited property value, the full cash property value from the assessor, and the market value had actually come down quite a bit, and all three of them were pretty close to on top of each other. Not the case right now.
Randy, could you talk a little bit about what causes those values to be reset? So we've had a lot of land go from ag vacant into homes or commercial along here, if you saw. And I think you might remember when we had our last workshop, I asked the assessor about drones flying over people's building and checking their square footage. Does that cause the whole property to be reassessed as if it were new?
If a property has changed substantially, and there's actually a statutory threshold, I think, of 15%, I think this is pretty recent. They tried to avoid, I don't know, you put a cover over a patio or something that doesn't do anything. But if you have some sort of, and the assessor doesn't see anything on the inside, so you do some remodel on the inside and all of a sudden, you've upgraded fixtures and they don't see that. What they're really looking at is square footage. But if you've done some sort of substantial addition to a property, it will grow by more than 5%. It will definitely be reassessed. But unlike in California, which the California concept is basically a property value stays the same until it's sold and then it's marked up to market. Unlike in California, there's a general ratio that is supposed to be kept in Arizona that all of our houses are somehow in a band of full cash value to limited property value. So even though it will be reassessed because the square footage has increased by 50%, it's still not as if it's still not going to go on the tax rolls at 100% of its market value. It's still going to be discounted in some sort of band like all the rest of the houses in the area. It is. It is.
He was specifically, that just happened to me. My taxes went up 42%. So when I see this,
And did you have a change in the structure of their property?
3 covered patios. That was assessed as livable space.
And so they picked up the additional square footage.
The drone came
and picked up the additional square footage.
Yeah, and the point of that is merely I'm looking at what this would increase my taxes and how do I determine that? And also we have a new community, in Alomar and we have communities, and I'm just trying to understand the difference between property value, assessed full cash value I get, right? And Zillow I totally get. I'm trying to understand what that value is taken off of, right?
So, I mean, actually, how they do this and why they do this. The assessor's full cash value is supposed to be sort of akin to market value. You can see it's definitely off right now. I assume that's kind of a function of the real estate market. They intentionally keep that number at about 85% of market value. And they do that across the state, so it's even for all of us, it's even in all the counties. But, you know, the point is, when I get my notice of value, and it tells me that my full cash value on my house is $285,000, and I think, I bet I could sell that for $100,000 more, I'm happy. If the assessor came and told me my full cash value was $400,000 and I think I can only sell it for $375,000, now I'm going to talk to my neighbors. It's like, well, what were you assessed at? But so they actually intentionally keep a gap between those two numbers. It's called, the Department of Revenue does equalization orders to keep it constant throughout the state. But every taxpayer can look up their own house, and it's the limited property value. The limited property value is what you are taxed on. And I've pulled 3 properties here, and you can see, the limited property value is less than half of the market value right now. It won't always be like that, but that's the circumstance that we're in now.
Madam President, we brought this before the board this evening for a couple of reasons. One being a discussion about an election in November of this year allows a district essentially what's called 2 bites at the apple if for some reason the election were to fail. Randy talked about it, that if the election were to fail, it wouldn't impact our M&O override for the following year and would allow us one more opportunity to go out in fiscal year 24. And second is, I believe when Dr. Freeman and I looked at the election schedule, we may have a capital override on the horizon as well. And so we didn't talk about this, Randy, but districts running 2 elections in the same fiscal year don't typically have the same success rate as a one question item.
We clearly, and I collect data on school districts and the multiple question activity. Almost always we see a little bit of voter fatigue on that second question, and sometimes both questions pass. Sometimes it's just the first question, and the voter fatigue, drops that second question off. Again, there's a lot more to it than just having 2 questions on the ballot. It's, your district, what else is out there, how you feel about the odd versus even year elections. But yes, that's a very common factor to look at, is the multiple question activity.
Madam President, members of the board, Jim, could you pull up that slide number 2 that Randy had? It's the one that's got the shaded years. So the reason we've always run our election in year 4 is because when you look at year 5, it's still fully funded. And you can see tax rate estimate goes down. Essentially, what we're seeing is net assessed value of the school district is increasing at a greater rate than the membership of the students. So if we had fewer students and lower property values, that wouldn't be true. If we had way more students and property values weren't going up as much, that wouldn't be true. But that's true in this case. So when you look at that 5th full year, if we run the election in year 4, there's not a tax increase. But when you look at year 5 compared to year 6, you see how it goes from 1.387 to 0.913? If we had to run that to return it back to 1.387, because your voter pamphlet is going to say, if you don't pass this, it's 91 cents. If you do pass it, it increases to $1.39. If we run it now, we're going to say the tax isn't going to increase, and I'm not sure because the language is regulated on what we have to put. Like we don't get, Mr. French and I don't get to pick the numbers. We're told what numbers go in the pamphlet. Yeah. But we can say with pretty good certainty, tax rate's not going to increase when you pass this. It'll stay the same. It may even go down. They'll give us those numbers. If we wait one more year, the tax rate increases the hypothetical failure from 91 cents to $1.39. And so whatever that difference is there of 48-cent increase is what would have to be in the pamphlet, right?
So this is a discussion item, correct? Thoughts? Conversation?
So just in short term, it would be smart for us as a district to do an override election this year instead of next year.
Madam President, Member Cisneros, in fact, what we really would be recommending is we run the exact same maintenance and operation override, almost the same pamphlet. We went back and looked at the actual expenditure of funds. So it's supporting full-day kindergarten still. It's helping us keep class sizes lower than surrounding areas. It adds to our ability to offer compensation to teachers. If we were going to have to cut out the override, it would eventually lead to salary decreases. And it helps us support art, music, and PE specifically, and it helps pay for our sports programs. So all of those things that were in the pamphlet last time continue to be true in the budget today. And if you weren't going to have the override, eventually they would all have to be reduced.
And at what point would that be? Is it a year, 2 years, 3 years?
Well, look at that chart when it goes down to 0.
So that would be, and what keeps me from running another one in year 8?
Yeah, that's the scenario Mr. French called second bite at the apple.
Okay.
Yeah, if you fail and people are like, what do you mean we're losing art, music, and PE?
Gotcha.
Oh, well, we'll run another election if you want to keep that. That's the second bite at the apple scenario.
That's what you were referring to. Okay. Any more questions, thoughts, concerns?
So,
Hearing
Madam
none,
President, what we will do on the, we will bring this back to the May meeting. At that point, we are working in the background on preparing the pamphlet as well as potentially a pro statement on behalf of the governing board. Wanted to know if you wanted to adopt both of those in May, approve the override and adopt the pro statement. That would change our language that we would, for the motion.
So I think we've asked questions, and I didn't hear any questions that may suggest that was not something the board was willing to look. I mean, I don't, but that's what I heard.
Okay, perfect.
We do have a deadline by which to call the election.
Understand.
Yeah, I did want to thank Randy. I think this is her second meeting this evening. I think she was running around Phoenix, so this is her.
Well, thank
this
you.
is her second board meeting this evening.
We appreciate you coming out, and thank you very much. All right.
Anytime, Randy.
Make it as simple as possible. We're moving on then. Thank you, Mr. French, to Dr. Freeman to give us a legislative update.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I'll, considering that we're closing in on 8 o'clock, I'll be brief.
Thank you.
The lawmakers wrapped up what's usually an intense couple weeks last week, sometimes referred down in the mall as Hell Week because it's the last chance for bills to be heard in committees in the opposite chamber, with the exception of House and Senate appropriations, which continue on with hearings because of the budget. Behind the scenes negotiations for the budget and other things may be the reason committee agendas were oddly light the last couple of weeks. Any bills that failed to receive a committee hearing are effectively dead, except for the vehicle of strike everythings, which we continue to attend to. The committees continue to meet in the coming weeks to hear presentations or consider executive nominations, but there's a lot of work to be done in final consideration bills on the floor. And so that's where you'll hear first, second, third read, where they actually count the votes on the board up on the wall. And that's the final consideration of bills. Senate Ed is meeting Wednesday, tomorrow, around 2 o'clock. They're going to do presentations on per pupil funding with JLBC staff and then school district spending from the Auditor General. So they're just hearing reports. So far, Governor Hobbs, I think, at the end of last week had vetoed 29 bills. I think maybe 3 more over the weekend. I'm losing count. She signed 22 into law, but only roughly 400 of the 1,630 bills remain in place. So 75% of them have been somehow sorted out. We sent information through our lobbyists when Kavanaugh's first pronoun bill came out, and said essentially we wanted pronoun amnesty. Like, we don't want to get in trouble for using them or not using them. It seems no matter what we do, we get in trouble. So, you know, we think we should, in education, work to do our best to treat everybody with respect and consideration, and having the threat of civil penalty or criminal penalty over pronouns. We have, as people are aware, more children dying of gunfire in America than anything else. And we have rampant substance abuse. We have all kinds of issues that we would love our legislature to deal with, and instead they're talking about pronouns. Last week, several of the superintendents in the Tolleson Union System met with state representatives. And our message was about opportunity and equity in K-12 legislation and the 2024 budget. For example, one of the things that the Tolleson system supports is Governor Hobbs' effort to convert school performance pay to base level per pupil funding. The current plan mostly recognizes more advantaged communities and leaves very little for those working with the most challenging students, so moving the funding to base support level would help all kids. We also had a productive meeting with Ciliana Chang, who used to be in Senate Democratic staff. Now she's the P12 education advisor to Governor Hobbs. She's a very experienced Capitol staffer, extensive knowledge of the legislative process, and actually gave us quite a bit of time. Her policy expertise includes K-12 and higher ed. And for those of you keeping count, she is a proud Sun Devil. Didn't make much difference in March Madness, but probably will in football season. We had a lot of conversation tonight about one-time money and ongoing money. And so a lot of the wrangling in the legislature has to do with ongoing revenue and one-time revenue and expenditures. So JLBC will probably be going over that tomorrow. What we're hearing is the legislative budget plans to keep the base support level increase at 2% with very limited one-time carve-outs. The governor's proposal was a 4.7% increase to the base with more ambitious carve-outs, which would help K-12 education a whole lot more. And as Mr. French said, given the current political climate, anything above 2% up to 4.7% would be very helpful, especially with inflation remaining around 6.5. It puts a lot of pressure on our staff to be able to continue working in education and have a living wage. So one of the things we've heard is there are special interest lists being circulated around the Capitol and some negotiations going on around that. How much is one time? How much is special interest? and how much special interest money do they need to spend to get you to vote on one budget or another. The impression I got last week was some of the pressure is getting a little more intense. And so I don't know what will result from that. We had actually a really good meeting with Ken Bennett, who's a senator from up north. He's been in the legislature before. He's also been Secretary of State. He was in the legislature when Napolitano was governor, and the makeup of the legislature was Republican. In that era, they were more practical about passing bills and less of, I'm not sure the right way to say this, this political purist, like if you compromise at all, then you're not truly a member of our caucus anymore. I think they were more practical about the art of compromise back in those days than they are today. And he's questioning whether that is good for the state or not. I think he's an advocate for common sense compromise in the legislature and the Republican Party. I hope my comments tonight don't get him voted out of office. But I think certainly that's what it's going to come down to is some people working out some deals with people who are taking a more mature aspect at lawmaking and budget making. I wish there was more certainty we could give the board with what's happening with the budget and bills down there. But everything seems to be in a kind of strange holding pattern, and when we know more, of course, we'll pass it along. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions if members have any. Right.
Very much. We appreciate the update. At this point, I will ask for an adjournment.
I motion the governing board adjourn at 7:54 p.m.
I had a motion. Do I have a second?
A second.
Thank you. Any opposed? Hearing none, we are adjourned at 7:54. Thank you.